The armed forces of Ukraine liberated Balakliia on September the 8th. For several days of work in the deoccupied city, the police and the prosecutor's office have recorded hundreds of war crimes by Russian army, which testify to genocide of Ukrainians.
Now we are present at the scene where the investigators, together with the forensic scientists and the prosecutors, are examining and removing the bodies of killed civilians. This terrible event happened before March the 6th, not far from this place, where we had just met at the location. At the crossroads of streets, the Russian occupiers had a checkpoint. There the invaders shot a car with two locals who were passing the checkpoint.
Why? I want to ask Putin why he killed my son. Why? Who did ask him to come here with such a terrible weapon? He ruined everything. He killed not only our children, he killed us, their mothers. I'm not living during these days. I'm dying every day, standing up on my feet. I'm dying. I want to appeal to all the mothers of the world. Rise up against this murderer. He's a criminal who will never be forgiven. I'm asking the God. I'm asking all of humanity to punish him with the most terrible trial, this Putin. Why does no one rise? Why do they still tolerate him?
Local residents of Balakliia tried to keep away from this building. The Russian invaders had set up a modern torture chamber here, in the local police department, where local residents used to be interrogated and tortured.
The Russian occupiers were stopping the guys and checking for Ukrainian tattoos. They could undress them in the middle of the street. They kept people here in the police department and interrogated them. My colleague lives nearby in the house, and she used to wake up at night because of the screams of our guys who were crying, "I don't know anything."
This is where the Russian occupiers used to take civilians who were simply detained in the street. Among the prisoners were rescuers and a teacher. Fleeing from the armed forces of Ukraine, the Russian occupiers left people locked in the cells.
They wrote Lord's Prayer on the wall. They were counting how many days they were kept here. It is very difficult to imagine, but 8 and even more people used to live in this place. Innocent civilians. There is no toilet in the room, so the Russian military were taking prisoners out with their eyes closed to the toilet, which is located on the street twice a day.
Artem was held more than 40 days in the prison cell. He was detained after research. They found a photo of his brother, a serviceman of the armed forces of Ukraine, in his military uniform. Artem was tortured with electricity. According to him, there is another resident of Balakliia who was detained for 25 days simply because a Ukrainian flag had been found at his house.
I was blindfolded and taken out. The Russians were driving me around the city at first, so that I couldn't understand where they wanted to bring me, and only when the Russian occupiers brought into their prison cell, the guys there told me where I was. Then, after 45 days, the Russians called me for interrogation and connected me to the electric device. They asked me, "You understand that your life is worth nothing here, right?" I answered, "I do understand that." Why? They were sitting there, really bored, twisting something in their hands. Once the Russians gave a sinji to one guy just to hold it and then asked, "Do you know what it is?" Then they twisted it and showed him.
Did you hear the women screaming?
Yes, but only when, as I thought, the women were tortured with electricity because they were screaming. That was pretty often. So when someone was being tortured there, the Russian invaders turned off the hood so that everyone could hear. We've got the testimony from a person who was in this room and was being tortured by the employees of the Federal Security Service of Russia at first. He tells that they put him on a chair in the basement, put a bag over his head and tortured him by tying wires with strings like this to his fingers. These strings were put on his fingers and an electric current were flown by them. The Russians threatened some of ours by shooting over their heads. You see these bullet holes? 1, 2, 3. There are also blood drops over them.
The Russian military deliberately hung anti-Ukrainian posters on the walls in the torture rooms.
We were in our cellar, our house had the cellar, and that's all. As the Russian invaders started to shoot, we ran through the corridor to the cellar. It was a cold weather then. I caught a cold. Oh, God forbid. Hope they will never come back.
We've got military from Donbass and Luhansk regions here. They were also recruits. God forbid. How it is said, even the enemy does not want this. All this moves me to tears, truly.
Did they take anything from locals?
Oh, they took our cars and phones. You know how many of those are there at the checkpoints. So they took the phones and trampled them. Good boys.
Whom did they stop there?
At first, during the first hours of the war, there was a bridge functioning from Balakliia. You were going there to the other side. If you have a phone, they take it from you and smash. And that's all. So we couldn't take photos of anything and talk to each other.
Those who were from the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, they were not needed by the Russian authorities because their military uniform was not good and their behavior was different. Some were dismissive because of a human factor, but they were not all the same. When some went into the store and could say something like, "Should I shoot your liver or your leg?"
For almost 7 months, people lived in a complete isolation. There were no mobile communications, no electricity, water and gas. Many actually starved. Tatiana was left with her son, a schoolboy, during the occupation. The woman says that they received free bread only twice during these 6 months. They tried to buy everything else.
А на що ви жили?
What money were you living on?
We lived on my retirement money. I have a disability group. I cashed out the money and we could live on it. They gave us credit cards. We could cash the money, only it was less than it had to be.
That is, the entire critical infrastructure is now in an emergency state and does not work, despite the fact that about 8,000 people are now located and live here. Given the circumstances that the head of the city is suspected of treason, the military administration will work in this area, and also the work of the state authorities will be established here, in fact resumed.
Mobile post offices have already begun to work in the liberated Balakliia. People will be able to receive their pensions. The banking system and the work of outpatient clinics are being also restored. The city has already begun to restore communications to conduct electricity and gas. People say when they saw the Ukrainian soldiers, they could not restrain their emotions.
My neighbor and I were crying. She says, "Are they really ours? Ours, Ukraine is here." It was so emotional.
They were fleeing so fast. My God, I don't know. They left everything behind. There is such a street, Prigorodnya, we call it. That is, there were 250 Russian soldiers. Where did they even come from? So they left all their assault rifles and everything else. And then, as people say, there was a sweep. So Russians were hiding, wearing civilian clothes. They were being caught by our men.
When the Russian occupiers were running away, they also were riding on flat tires. I know because I live next to the bypass, so I could hear how their tire rubber was bursting right on the asphalt. Then we heard shooting, probably there was a fight, and on the second day in the evening I heard the equipment moving again, but it was a different sound. I ran across the garden and say, "Oh my God, ours are coming." When Ukraine came to us, nothing more was needed. Everything is very good now because we have Ukraine here.
According to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, 3,800 square kilometers, more than 300 settlements, and about 150,000 Ukrainians have been liberated from the Russian invaders in the Kharkiv region since September the 6th. Reported by Diana Kolesnik, Anastasia Zhuk, UATV News.